So there's a saying that magic is just science that we don't understand yet. And I took that to heart when I started homeschooling. Hi, I am Mimi the Feral Southern Housewife. Welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel for those who already follow me. And today we are going to talk about the scope and sequence of your witchy homeschool and what that looks like to plan out. Now, having a witchy or magical homeschooling doesn't mean that you have to start over from scratch, nor does it mean that you have to use Wicca or New Age or any kind of packets or outlines or anything like that. There is a way to make this work with your beliefs, with how you want your children to learn, and how the flow of your house goes. If the Christians can do it, so can we, right? So remember that the whimsy you place on the space held for learning will do far more than trying to teach your 6-year-old how to make potions. Arthur C. Clarke, a renowned author, has said that there were 3 laws for fantasy, and the 3rd law states that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So if we look at things through the lens of folklore or through the lens of natural science, we see that magic has always been around us and is always part of what we do. So while this is a really nice notion and I can repeat myself until I am blue in the face, that part isn't what the focus is for today. That was my last video. So if you want to know about having a whimsical or magical mindset when it comes to homeschooling, go ahead on back to my channel and go watch it. Previously, I had discussed examples for how to bring magic and things into your homeschool, but now we're going to look at the actual scope and sequence for how planning goes with that, what that might look like. And I'm going to use an example from last year's curriculum. So whether you are already using a curriculum that you've pre-bought, or you are making one up, or you are trying to bring this into your unschooling space as a thing for your children to experience, we need to be able to mete out the magic in every subject and be purposeful with it. When I say you can incorporate magic or whimsy or anything like that into every subject, you can. You will find more magic, especially in our science sections. That includes natural science, biology, herbalism, cooking, energy and physics, and everything that goes into that, geology, chemistry, so on and so forth. I really, truly believe a lot of what we already know as science once started as magic. Language arts is another one that we can bring a little bit of whimsy and magic into. It is not just because we can have fantasy and idealism in that part. We can break down storytelling for themes and understanding the purpose of the story, as well as using visualizations and trying to craft something with imagination. After all, what is manifestation if not imagination? Now, music and art also can contribute to this. You can have your folk stories, you can have your folk music, you can have form drawing, intuitive dance, intuitive creation, as well as fiber arts, knot work, knot magic, things like that. I mean, if we look at like examples in Appalachia, you've got your hex signs on barns and quilting symbols and everything in between. Like there were times that we had patterns that carried over to protect the new baby when the quilt was made, or to promote love and unity for a married couple. They were also used and very prevalent in underground railroad systems for different patterns that you would need, as well as communicating between families. Fantasy can even be in math, okay? I know it does not feel like you can put magic into math, but you really can, especially when it comes to cooking and the overlap with chemistry. Math can have magic through number stories and practical applications. Like, you're not going to worry about whether or not you have enough in your spell oil if you just kind of glub it in and don't pay attention. So if you're wanting to make jars and oils and things like that, you're going to need to know how to measure. That's magic. Magic has math. Social studies and social sciences, we talk a lot about folklore, folk culture, cultural influences, and things like that. So really dig into what's local around you. Even if you feel like there's nothing, there is something. For example, here in Wisconsin, we have a lot of Ho-Chunk and Hmong influences in our culture, as well as a standard Germanic and Polish. So being able to pull off of what these symbols mean, what it can mean, and integrate into the community, as well as how we live in the day-to-day, that is all part of building up the foundations of your magic. The biggest part of having magic in your homeschool is remembering correlations. This is more important than sticking to just your general magical terms, right? So, for example, we discussed the 4 elements last year, and then we mirrored that after the seasons for our science as well as our art. And we discussed things like the color wheel and influences and how color theory started to work. That just kind of developed on its own, which was really cool. We reviewed movies and songs and stories and pointed out where magic was mentioned or even if it was hidden in plain sight. If your kids watch K-pop Demon Hunters, you have a magical movie to discuss because that is huge in Korean culture. Now, there's a difference between studying it to appreciate it and studying it to co-opt it. So just remember that even if it's really cool, if you are not a Korean family or have Korean influences, remember that this is just something to study, to keep in the back of your mind, something really cool. We don't want anyone trying to work with any orishas or anything in the Asian community. It's not ours. You know what I'm saying? So how are we going to do this? You've got your curriculum, you've got your idea, you know what to do. Now, how are you going to plan it out? Because planning is important. You are going to need access to a library or the internet. Also, Pinterest. Don't get mad at me for that one. I know there's a lot of AI on it, but I promise there's also a lot of good things you can find. A lot of links to things like OutSchool and Teachers Pay Teachers that you can get inspiration from if you are on a very tight budget. Also, you're going to need a like-minded community. This can be online, this can be in person, but you're going to need a space where you can talk about this and get feedback and ask questions and have a place where it is okay to be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Welcome to my beautiful workspace and my dusty desk. I wanted to break this down and bring it to you for what I mean by scope and sequence. As you can see, this is where we have our fables. We break it down week 1, what our verse is going to be. As we move on, so we've got circle time books. We have specific stories that we want to talk about. I wish, dear sweet camera, why are you having so much trouble today? All right. Our art and music include things that are important as far as like free drawing, listening, and what we're going to learn for rhythm. But this is the very important part here. So we have science. That is the Song of the Elements book that I purchased separately, but you can get it from the library. We are talking about air for the first element, and we are incorporating games, different items like a windmill, and we did make a little, I think they're called they're pinwheels. We made pinwheels to show what blowing and what air would look like. But we also discussed the colors that are incorporated into it. So like white, silver, things like that. And we talked about spring. We do end up, so we've got air. And then as we go through with months of the year, you can see this later, I've scribbled out a lot. This is what a scope and sequence is going to look like when you're homeschooling. There's lots of ideas and scribbles, and then you just break it down as you need to. But that's what I mean. You can incorporate it into every single one. How are you going to set it up? Because there's a lot of states where you are required to show what you're doing. So I can't get rid of this. I can take pictures and scan it, but I can't get rid of it yet. So that was for 2nd grade. Our kindergarten and 1st grade also has that kind of detailing, but for the most part, I break it down in my mind. How can I put magic into this? How can I make it interesting for this age? Where am I going to have magic and bring this in? Where am I going to bring the folklore? Where am I going to bring in the superstitions? Etc., etc. And it's okay. This is a big one. It is okay to not bring a lot of this to your younger children. Now, I know There are other kids out there who are older, who can handle a little bit more, and who are ready to explore something for their own path. And what are we going to do about that? If you have a foundation already set, so you've got family practice you've already been doing, if you've been doing your craft around them, or you incorporate it some way into the household, this is going to be what helps your kids when they're older. Okay? If you don't have that foundation, you can start small. So your kid's going to need to, even if they already understand water, earth, air, and fire, they're still going to need to sit with what that means and how we approach our elements and nature and how we bring that into our life. You know what I'm saying? There are some things that you learn as a foundation that will never, ever leave you. And that's one of those things where sit with the experience. When you are ready for your older kid, or when your older kid is ready, it's time to look at things a little bit differently. You're going to dive into a deeper level of folklore. Grimm's fairy tales can get really, really deep and dark, and they're ready for it. Work on their intuition. So you can do that through expression of dance and art and music. Have them just sit with a feeling and let them express it. Let them get it out. Air magic, singing, very, very important. A lot of us do it with a lot of our practice, whether we realize it or not. Spoken words, songs, and things like that's all incredibly important to what we practice. So definitely keep that in mind. If you have a crystal girly or a crystal kiddo like I do, you're going to learn that almost everything is quartz. But you can bring it into another level of geology. How does quartz get made? How does this get made? What does it mean? The different types of rocks, and basically have an intro to geology with your earth sciences. I did this for my Izzy when she was super into crystals, and she still is. She's very much into like crystals and having her gemstones and wanting to go, but she likes the geology aspect a lot. My dad is a rock hound. He does a lot of geology work, and when they would go pick up stones and he'd name them off and rattle them off, I think she was maybe two when they started doing that together. So that's their big thing now, is every summer they go find some extra rocks. But knowing for her, she's like, well, I know this is going to help me calm down. And I also know that it's because quartz sat with iron. And I'm like, awesome. That's so cool. You've got both aspects of it. And it's just as important to know the physical part as it is the metaphysical part. So when it comes to things like tarot and oracle decks and things like that, teaching them that it is a tool for their intuition is going to be super important. But also remember that there is a history to it. We don't just pick up something and don't listen to why it's important. Learning how and why this deck was used, or any deck that you might use, or any kind of divination, whether it's charms or candle magic or scrying or anything like that. If your kiddo has a more divinatory lean, look into the cultural aspects and the history. So that's your social studies right there, as well as giving them something that they can hold on to. And of course, I speak kindly and greatly on things like herbalism and gardening for our biology and our earth sciences. You also have things like your basic first aid for poultices and the potions, so tinctures and things like that. You can bring that in as a science. So if they're really interested, make sure that they have something that's viable and not just a random TikTok or YouTube video. Like, actually check the sources for who's teaching them how to make what. This also goes for mixing essential oils, incense, any kind of creative outlet there, candle making, and all of those things. Correspondences are going to be important, but again, you'll learn more of that in your science, as well as, earth science, your biology, why the rocks mean these, but you end up blending everything in together. They may be ready for more advanced fiber work, or they might actually have an interest in the fiber work. Teach them the wonders of this craft. Anything historical to do with witches and things like that, because I know we all somehow had a Salem witch trial phase. How do I know that? Because most public school systems forced us to read The Crucible, and we all had a Salem witch trial phase. I'm just saying. Something else that they're doing that I'm noticing they're doing more in public schools and they're doing in a lot of charter schools is emotional wellness and greatness. So add that to yours as part of your health sciences. Mental and emotional wellness work are part of health science. And we really need that because shadow work is only as effective as having tools in your toolbox to use when things happen. So even if you're having a generally good time, you're like, I'm not traumatizing my kid. They're still going to need to be able to handle those big feelings and those stresses and anything that they need to do with emotional regulation. They're going to need those tools. So that's going to be a huge part of it as well. Think of it as preemptive shadow work. And who knows? Maybe you'll heal something about yourself too. All right. I know I've talked your ear off, but the more I get it out there for y'all, hopefully the more inspiration, the more ideas that you have. So now that you've seen it written down, now that you understand ways to bring it to your bigger kiddos for their scope and sequence and writing it down, I hope that this helps with your planning. I will be doing a live planning session over Labor Day weekend. If you have already started your homeschooling, that is fantastic. I know that a lot of places have different times to go in. Wisconsin has very lenient laws, and we like to start our homeschooling journey for the year after the equinox. It makes more sense that way. We're able to lean into the seasonal shift of everything, and I know I've spoken on this before. I've probably spoken on it at length, and I probably will continue to say, but having that kind of rhythm in your home is really helpful. So if you are able to do so, I would strongly suggest doing it. If you are not, I know you know how to make it work because you already do. You're already doing great. I will be doing a live on YouTube for planning. So scope and sequence planning. And if you have any questions at all, I will be here to answer questions, and it'll be going for, I want to say, about an hour, 90 minutes, give or take there. So please make sure that you have notifications turned on, and you will have a notice for that live at the end of this video. And thank you so much for coming along on this journey. Thank you so much for sitting and listening, and I hope that you have a blessed day. Bye now.